today I have a great guest that I want to bring to you, and our guest is Melissa Miller. She is going to speak to us about personal injury and the areas that she focuses on. When I turn the screen, won't be able to see Melissa. Hi, Melissa. How are you?
Hi, Lucy. I'm good. How are you?
Good. Welcome. I know you have been on TV so many times. This is not your first time, but we are not tired of listening to you. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome, awesome. As we start, I would like to ask you to educate our viewers a little bit about you. And we like starting from the time before you became a lawyer.
Yeah, sure. I grew up actually a little bit in Toronto and then a little bit in rural Ontario. And I was an artist before I became a lawyer. I still paint and draw, but yeah, I went to school on a full scholarship to be an artist. And then I thought, I think I want a career that I can help people more, and then I switched to law.
That's great. Wonderful. And did you say you are raised in Northern Ontario?
Rural Ontario.
Rural Ontario.
Yeah.
That's great. That's good to know. So I didn't then see that you became a lawyer. Tell us about the journey from there to when you became a lawyer.
Yeah, so I went to the University of Toronto. I double majored in political science and philosophy, and then I went to the University of Windsor law program, and then came back to Toronto to do my articles and to practice. And I've been with Howie Saxon Henry for my entire career as a lawyer, other than when I was articling.
That's great. That's wonderful. So I like that consistency. And by the way, I've talked to other lawyers in the same law firm and they've been there for the entire time. So there's something great about that law firm that makes people want to stay there. I'm sure we'll get to hear more about it from you. So here is then my question for you. Obviously, there are many areas of law, right? So why did you decide to focus on personal injury law?
Well, when I was a law student and green, green as they come, all I knew is that I wanted to be in court and I wanted to represent people, not companies. And but I didn't want to do criminal law and I didn't want to do family law. I thought, those are some pretty difficult areas. And I didn't really know that personal injury law was a field until I became a lawyer. And then I was introduced to some of the lawyers at Howie Saxon Henry and had some experience working on a few files when I was articling. And I thought, this is the area of law for me. I get to help people. People are my clients. I get to work with every demographic of the population. And I'm helping people when they need it the most get accountability and compensation for their injuries.
Thank you. Thank you for doing that, Melissa. So, personal injury is very broad, very wide, right? So, there are so many areas in personal injury law. Even me, I started getting to know about it the other day. So, then you decided to branch out into a specific area of law in personal injury. Can you share with our viewers what that area of law is and why you decided to do that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I still practice all areas. I still, do your traditional motor vehicle accident, product liability cases, but my focus, I would say about at least half my practice right now is on elder law. And I represent families and individuals, residents in nursing homes and retirement homes across Canada seek justice and accountability for negligence and abuse in our nursing homes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So there's a little bit more about that you're going to tell us. So what made you do that? What made you see that area of elder law for you to be able to jump into it and decide to help?
I think it was a few things. Growing up, I was very close with the seniors in my community. As I said, I lived in a rural community. There weren't a lot of people my age around. I had a lot of childcare responsibilities for my siblings, and my neighbors were seniors, and I would clean their house, mow their lawn, rake their leaves. And after I, would do these things for them, they'd have me inside and I'd talk to them and hear their stories. I was also very, very close with my grandparents. So I have that personal background. And then when I started practicing in personal injury, I really started to see a gap in how our seniors were treated in injury cases, and also that no one was really handling nursing home negligence claims. And the reason for that is the damages are pretty low, and I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit later about what that means. But I saw this sort of gap, and it meant something to me to be able to fill it and advocate for the most vulnerable members of our society.
Thank you for doing that, Melissa. Thank you for. So then, what are the unique things that you have encountered in this area of law? Why is it unique?
I think personal injury in general, you're dealing with people who've experienced trauma. They've had their lives turned upside down by a single event in some way, shape, or form, and they are incredibly vulnerable when that happens. They need help in getting their lives back together, or in the situation of a lot of the nursing home cases where people have not survived the negligence or abuse, which are wrongful death claims, helping the families get some closure and some justice and accountability for what happened to their loved one. So you're dealing with people's emotions, you're dealing with people's very personal lives, and, that means having to connect with people at a very human and emotional level, which I think brings this area of law outside of other areas of law. It's hard to, you obviously have to remain objective, but it's called personal injury law for a reason. It's personal.
So thank you, really, Melissa, for helping. We appreciate you for that. So, what are the specific issues that you deal with on behalf of families when they bring their loved ones to you?
Yeah, I would say I mean, any issue really, but the issues that I see the most in our long-term care homes and retirement homes are falls that result in injury. So the most common type of injury that happens from a fall is, broken hips, broken pelvises, head injuries that often can lead to internal bleeding and intracranial hemorrhages. Those are the cases, they lead to a lot of wrongful death cases. There's also bed sores, which is not the correct name. The technical name are pressure injuries, but most people know them as bed sores. These are, I think, some of the hardest cases that we work on from an emotional level, because in my view, pressure injuries and bed sores, ulcers are 100% preventable 100% of the time with proper care. And there isn't enough of that in Canada, in my view. And I think that there should be. So these are excruciatingly painful injuries for the residents that can lead to infection and death. So they're extremely common, unfortunately. The other areas that I see very commonly are medication issues, nutrition and hydration issues. Those are also very big. And just general neglect. I think, especially since COVID, when we saw how long-term care homes were ravished by the pandemic and the ensuing staffing issues that really were highlighted pre-pandemic and are now becoming even worse. There's just, overall neglect, residents not being showered properly, not having their teeth brushed or their dentures maintained properly. Any small thing can easily escalate and snowball into a huge health concern for a resident that is extremely vulnerable and lead to very serious injury or death.
Wow, thank you. You know what? I didn't think about all that. And thank you that you have actually investigated and gone into those details. I appreciate you. You're actually the first person or injury lawyer that I'm speaking to about Honda law and the details that our viewers need to know. So I wanted to ask you then, can you help us to understand how access to justice, how you help with access to justice? What are the issues around there?
Yeah, so personal injury law in general, and that includes elder law, is a unique way of charging fees. We operate mostly on contingency fees, which means we only get paid at the conclusion of a successful result, which means that our clients can come to us for legal advice and representation without having to pay us an initial retainer or pay us along the way. We carry the cost of the litigation until the very end of the case. And that enables people who otherwise would not be able to afford legal representation to have legal representation. So I would say that's the biggest area that is very unique among personal injury lawyers from other areas of law.
Wonderful. Thank you for letting us know that you don't get paid until when the client is paid. Really, that's another area that I like about what you're doing. And I think it's fair to say that having a law firm that supports you to be able to achieve that, it's a great way. Now, I wanted to ask you, are there any limitations in elder law? And if there are any, what are those?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest limitation in this area of law is the reason why there weren't really any lawyers doing it is that the cases are not worth a huge amount of dollars in our court system. You hear about these extremely high damage awards in the United States. We don't have that in Canada. Personal injury law in general does not carry the kinds of damages that you hear about on American television or American news, which is what a lot of Canadians hear about more than Canadian cases. Um, the there's a cap on damages for pain and suffering and loss of enjoyment of life in Canada, and it's lower than you would think. And so most cases tend to have the value in the cost of future ongoing care needs and loss of income. Well, in elder law cases where you're not even dealing with someone's loss of income and you have a lower life expectancy, obviously, dealing with any future care needs that come as a result of any injury, these cases are worth a lot less. And so it can be very risky to take on some of these fights from an evidentiary basis when the outcome is relatively modest or negligible within our courts. And so it's meant having to be very creative about how to build these cases and build the evidence and the stories around these cases to make them compelling and hopefully push the needle within our courts and within our justice system to actually increase the value of these cases so that we can deter negligence within our long-term care and retirement homes.
Thank you. Thank you. So, how do you deal with those limitations? And I think when I'm asking that, is there a way that you can influence, maybe through the Law Society, for the laws to be changed to make the awards more for those injured in that way?
One of the things that's unique about the way that I practice is I talk about bookended accountability. So, in my view, in this area of law, because it's so unique, I use litigation as one bookend within our courts to get justice and accountability for negligence. But the other bookend that is equally important is within our legislature. And I will say I walk the walk. I advocate outside of the courtroom intensely with protests and demonstrations, lobbying the government, meeting. I testified before the House of Commons, even at the federal parliamentary level, to have changes to our laws so that we can better protect our most vulnerable. So to me, it's critical that you have people who understand the entire system, that can advocate within the entire system. And that's what I've tried to do uniquely to build my area of practice.
Thank you. Thank you so much that you actually decided to deal with it from the legal perspective, but then also because the politicians are the ones who have to make those changes. So, did it creating awareness? And you know what, Melissa? I followed you, including on Twitter. So, I know what you are doing, and I'm extremely proud of you.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Awesome. Great. So let me ask you, this is a very touchy point that I'm bringing, and feel free to answer it the way you feel comfortable. How does race play out? People who are racialized, are they affected most? What's going on in that area?
So I think you're asking me about how race enters into the picture in these cases,
Yes.
and I can tell you that those who are impacted the most by long-term care are usually those from lower socioeconomic means, and I don't think it's a surprise that our racialized communities are statistically at a lower socioeconomic advantage. But the other area is that, without question, most of the staff providing care to our most vulnerable are racialized women. And so it's not just a race issue, it's also a gender issue. And it's an issue, a broader issue, because they're not paid the way they should be paid. This is considered women's work for the most part. There's very few men in the field, and it's very apparent in the way that their structure, in the expectations of the staff, and how little resources they're provided with the level of expectation that is on them to provide a ton of care to a huge amount of residents with very little resources and time. And so, yet again, this is another area that we're seeing that racialized people are suffering the most in this area.
Wow, thank you for letting us know, Melissa. I actually didn't know that. I'm learning a lot from you, and thank you for taking time to dig deep. So, my question for you then is, during the pandemic, we heard that there were so many casualties, impacts in the seniors' homes, so many people died. How did this affect your practice, and what can you talk to us about elder law and the pandemic?
Well, as I said before, the pandemic just highlighted the existing cracks within the system. I was already practicing in this area when the pandemic hit. But what I think the pandemic did was show everybody where the gaps and the cracks were. And I think the public, on large, got a real taste of what's really been going on in our long term care and retirement homes in Canada. It was a wake up call for the public. It was a wake up call for our politicians. Those who are in the advocacy sphere and in the world of elder law and senior care already knew that these deficiencies had been long standing for decades. Decades. This is one of the most underfunded areas within our society, and people had been ringing the alarm bells for years without any proper funding and changes to the system. So naturally, when the pandemic hit and when COVID hit our most vulnerable the hardest, long-term care homes and retirement homes took the brunt of that. And I think I think it the level of awareness that people have gained hasn't gone away. I was a little worried initially that, oh, people are going to get fed up with hearing these news stories. People aren't going to have the same level of concern. They're going to forget about it. I I don't think that's happening. I think there's still a trickling of news stories dealing with long-term care issues, that are really angering people. I think the public knows, or at least I hope they know, that the problems haven't been fixed, and far from it. We still need a huge amount of change within our federal and provincial governments. And we need better funding. We need more staff. The staff need to be trained better. They need way more resources. We need much greater accountability within government, especially for private care home operators. And the public knows that. And what's, in my view, amazing about that is that the power is with the public because we're the voters. So these, for the first time ever, I saw long-term care issues and senior issues become election issues in the federal and provincial elections. And that was a function of the media doing its job and the public outcry for the kind of resources and support that are needed. And that hasn't gone away. People are still ringing those alarm bells and wanting continued change. And so I think we're going to continue to see that push. I'm certainly going to be one of those driving the push.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So, what I know, we know the problem now from what you have said. Everyone knows the problem. I know you have testified at the House of Commons, but we know it takes longer to make these decisions and things to be implemented. I feel the rush. I feel like you want it to be done now. What would you like and to see? What are the changes would you like to see, and how do you think they will be achieved as quickly as we need to? Because we don't want to lose more people.
Yeah, I mean, one of the easiest changes that could be made very quickly is to bring back mandatory annual inspections. So this government, when this government came into power, they eliminated mandatory unannounced annual inspections in long-term care homes in 2019. And you can see a real shift in the stats in the homes. So what happens now is a family member, maybe a staff member or a resident makes a complaint with the government, with the ministry, and then the ministry will go in and do an inspection. What could help more immediately is to have unannounced annual comprehensive inspections that are mandatory. It's one of the easiest fixes. And that's something that I've been working with the government on for well over a year. They kind of came part way. They permitted unannounced annual inspections, but they haven't made them mandatory. And the other area is greater enforcement, higher fines, getting more inspectors in there with greater enforcement powers so that lawsuits are not the only mechanism of accountability to get justice for the residents and the families.
Thank you. So, Melissa, thank you so much for doing that. So, what do you think it will take to make those changes happen? Is it changing the leadership because you're pushing and you're talking, and then they are doing it and saying it's not mandatory? I remember, Melissa, I used to own a nail salon in London, and they used to have surprise inspections in a nail salon, right? For healthcare purposes. They never used to tell us when they are coming. So we used to be on, like render every day because we don't know when they are coming. So I understand what you're saying. So what do you think needs to be done to change those leaders, or what do we need to do, Melissa?
You know, I've always said that the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And so I think it's just families not giving up and keeping their voices loud and clear to make sure that they're letting their elected officials know that these are the things that they want. It's exhausting to be simultaneously trying to provide care to your loved one, advocating for their well being, and trying to convince the government what to do, or to be grieving the loss of your loved one and then also be the one having to advocate for change. It's exhausting. And that's why there's a lot of advocacy and caregiver burnout in this area. So it's up to all of the members of the public to continue to make sure that our elected officials know what it is that's important to them. And there isn't a single one of us who isn't going to have some experience with long term care in our lives, either ourselves or one of our loved ones. Getting old is part of the human condition if we're lucky enough. And we should all be concerned about this and we should all care about this. It's terrifying when you think about it. So it's really all of our problem to make sure that we keep our voices heard.
Thank you so much. I can see it even takes almost a political angle because really the politicians have to look into this, right? Because what can you do other than to keep letting them know? But if you ever want us to be involved in any way at all, please let me know.
Thanks, Lucy.
Um, I just wanted to ask you then, this wonderful lawyer who takes care of our seniors, how do people find you? I put your website there, I put your phone number there, but how else do people find you and how can I help to get more people to find you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty available on the website. We have a live chat system on our website that people can ask to get access to me. My email is on my profile on the website, along with my direct phone number, so you can call me, email me, and we offer free consultations. So I'm happy to speak with anybody who has questions or concerns or thinks they might have a case, and do whatever I can to help.
Wonderful. Thank you for finding the time, Melissa. So we are almost coming to an end of this, and I want to appreciate you as a member of the Entrepreneur Nation. You recently joined us. It didn't take you time to say yes, and I really love how you relate with our members. I like how you say, when I look at all of you, all the professionals, I know I can work with you to help you to serve your clients as they also help you. So how are you finding it? And how do you see yourself working with other professionals going forward?
Yeah, it's certainly it's a good network, a broad network of individuals. I can see the potential for cross referrals, which is a unique marketing experience. I think when I mean, I'm still very new and I'm getting to know everyone who's in my group, but because of the nature of personal injury, like I was saying before, I mean, you're really dealing with every aspect of someone's life that may have been impacted by an accident or injury. So, sometimes people have a need for a family lawyer, or there's an estate issue that comes up, or they need financial planning advice. There's post settlement concerns and planning that people have. So, really, every single aspect of your life that's impacted can need someone to help them. And that's where I see the network being able to assist my clients and me, because it's sort of a one-stop shop. Everybody's just there at your fingertips.
Thank you so much. We definitely appreciate you. And we are coming to an end of the show. Do you have any final words for our viewers?
Just that if you are not sure if you have a case, think maybe, there's something you want to ask me about, by all means, reach out. I'm always available, and I'll do what I can. And if I can't help you, I'll try to point you in the right direction.
Thank you so much. Our viewers, we are very happy that you have stayed with us for the entire time. And we thank Melissa for coming up to talk to us about Honda Law, the very first lawyer who has come out to talk to us about this. We appreciate you a lot.
Thanks so much,
Thank,
Lucy.
thank you for watching.